Coming up today, Korea's main opposition ends its more than 7-day-long filibuster aimed at blocking a controversial anti-terrorism bill to allow the approval of other pending bills, including a redrawn electoral map. China's top nuclear envoy urges Seoul's foreign minister to carefully consider plans to deploy a US missile defense system to the Korean peninsula. First, South Korea and the United States agree on a draft accord on space-related technology. Seoul hopes to send an unmanned mission to the moon by 2020. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Tuesday, March 1st here in Seoul. Thanks for joining us on Korea's Independence Movement Day. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this morning. South Korea's main opposition party has decided to end its more than 1 week-long filibuster aimed at blocking the passage of an anti-terrorism bill. Leaders of the Minju Party of Korea made the call late Monday. The party's floor leader, Lee Jong-gol, will make the official announcement at 9 a.m. Korea time this morning, so just under 3 hours from now. The opposition's decision means the controversial anti-terrorism bill, which will grant much greater power to the nation's spy agency to track potential terrorist suspects, is now highly likely to pass. This, as the ruling Saenuri Party controls more than half of the seats in the National Assembly. The ruling party has welcomed the decision. Its chief spokesman expressed the party's relief and said Parliament should promptly approve the anti-terrorism bill and another bill that redraws Korea's electoral district map. The map issue has become an urgent issue as Koreans will head to the polls in mid-April for a general election. China's top nuclear envoy has reiterated Beijing's strong opposition to the planned deployment to the Korean peninsula of a powerful US missile defense system known as THAAD. The latest confirmation came during meetings with South Korean officials in Seoul on Monday. Kwon So-ah reports.
Another straightforward confirmation. China's special representative to the six-party nuclear talks, Woo Da-wei, has reaffirmed Beijing's opposition towards the possible deployment of a U.S. THAAD missile defense system to South Korea. This latest confirmation came after a closed-door meeting with Seoul's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se on Monday.
China is opposed to the US and South Korea's stance on the deployment of THAAD in South Korea. We explain China's stance and hope that the US and South Korea give weight to China's interests and that they handle this issue appropriately.
According to an official at Seoul's foreign ministry, the issue was also addressed during a separate meeting between Woo and Vice Foreign Minister Im Seong-nam earlier in the day. The official said, though, the two spent a majority of their time on other issues of mutual interest, and the Chinese envoy used the meeting to emphasize the importance of Seoul and Beijing's strategic cooperative partnership. Seoul's foreign ministry stated that Woo and Foreign Minister Yoon assessed the unprecedented strong UN Security Council sanctions against North Korea, which were formed through some 50 days of close cooperation, would be adopted soon. It also said that China vowed sincere efforts towards an effective implementation of the sanctions. China's top nuclear envoy is expected to continue discussions with South Korean officials, including Unification Minister Hong Yong-pyo on Tuesday, before returning to China on Thursday. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now, China has joined international efforts to send a strong message to North Korea for its latest nuclear missile provocations. It means Pyongyang is likely to be hit with the toughest UN Security Council sanctions yet. And for many, Seoul's improved ties with Beijing played a crucial role in securing Beijing's support. Connie Kim has the details.
China had been emphasizing peaceful dialogue to resolve the crisis over North Korea's nuclear weapons program, delaying the UN Security Council's sanctions resolution on Pyongyang. So, what could have possibly caused Pyongyang's longtime ally to change its attitude? Panelists at a seminar from the Korean National Diplomatic Academy noted South Korea's diplomatic efforts with China as a major factor.
South Korean President Park Geun-hye's decision to attend China's World War II anniversary celebrations reflected Seoul's will for strong ties with Beijing. I doubt Seoul would have been able to persuade China to show a stronger stance against Pyongyang without such efforts.
President Park and Chinese President Xi Jinping held 6 summits since the two took office. President Xi has even assessed the two countries' relations as being at its highest. But experts also point out Seoul and Washington's alliance as another factor that could have pressed Beijing to shift its stance.
China may have realized South Korea and the U.S. boasted a stronger alliance when it raised opposition against a THAAD deployment and showed a lukewarm response to UN sanctions. It's ironic that the stronger Seoul-Washington ties grow, the easier it is to get China engaged.
Beijing agreed on a draft UN resolution after its Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry in Washington last week, following united calls for it to slap heavier sanctions on Pyongyang. The general consensus seems to be that Beijing decided it could no longer take the same stance it took previously, especially since stronger Seoul-Washington ties will be unfavorable for China in the long term. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's foreign minister is expected to address North Korea's human rights issues during an upcoming 4-day trip to Geneva. Seoul's foreign ministry says Yoon Byung-se will travel to Switzerland on this Tuesday to attend the 31st session of the UN Human Rights Council and the Conference on Disarmament as a speaker at both meetings. Minister Yoon is expected to bring up human rights violations in North Korea to draw international attention to the issue. His North Korean counterpart, Lee Soo-young, is also scheduled to give a speech at the human rights meeting, most likely to deny all the accusations against Pyongyang. 2016 marks the 10th year of the UN Human Rights Council, with South Korea holding the presidency this year. The United States has been displaying its unwavering military support for its allies in Northeast Asia in the face of North Korea's recent provocations. Washington has been demonstrating the firepower it has at its disposal. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
South Korea's defense ministry said on Monday that Washington showed its readiness to protect the Korean peninsula during a joint tabletop exercise in California. The TTX, an annual anti-nuclear exercise, was held at the Vandenberg Air Force Base, where some 40 defense officials from Seoul and Washington met to discuss warfare strategies to better counter Pyongyang's nuclear threats and weapons of mass destruction. Deputy Minister for National Defense Policy, Ryu Jae-sung, led the South Korean side. The U.S. was co-led by Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear and Missile Defense Policy, Elaine Bunn, and Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia, Abraham Denmark. During the exercise, the U.S. displayed key strategic weaponry, including B-52 bombers capable of carrying nuclear bombs and cruise missiles, and demonstrated a contingency plan for South Korea. And in another show of might, U.S. officials revealed that a successful test launch of its Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile could target Pyongyang. Washington also showcased its ground-based interceptor, or GBI, which is capable of intercepting incoming ballistic missiles to protect the U.S. mainland. Military officials said the displays were designed to give assurances of Washington's promise of extended deterrence against North Korea. This year's joint exercise marks the 5th of its kind since the Extended Deterrence Policy Committee was established in 2011. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon has urged South Korea and Japan to comply with their landmark wartime sexual slavery agreement that was reached late last year. Speaking at the 31st session of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva on Monday local time, Ban stressed the importance of addressing the pain of the now elderly victims no matter how many years have passed since their enslavement ended. He said the faithful implementation of the agreement, guided by the recommendations of UN human rights mechanisms, would help heal the women's wounds. Now, Seoul and Tokyo concluded the deal in December of last year, but a handful of Japanese officials have since made comments that could potentially jeopardize the agreement. Now, in regards to the humanitarian crisis in North Korea, the UN chief said the UN Commission of Inquiry has recorded as many human rights violations as it could and would strive even harder to rectify the problem. South Korea's business sentiment has slumped to its lowest level since the height of the global financial crisis in early 2009. The contributing factors to the grim mood are weak global and domestic demand. Hwang Jie with this report.
Despite a record low key rate and the government's aggressive stimulus measures, confidence among Korean manufacturers remains subdued. The Bank of Korea says the business sentiment index for February dropped to 63 from a month ago, marking the fourth straight month of decline. The figure even stands below the 66 posted in June last year when the MERS outbreak flattened the country's spending. The central bank says weak demand at home and abroad have caused the drop.
Businesses point to sluggish domestic demand, slumping exports, and increased volatility stemming from uncertainties in exchange rates and interest rates as major corporate risks this year.
In fact, the Korean won weakened sharply against the U.S. dollar in early trading on Monday, plunging to an almost six-year low. Although the local currency recovered some early losses and closed up against the greenback from the previous session, experts say financial market volatility remains due to faltering oil prices and the unstable Chinese market. They add such uncertainties will continue to threaten business activities.
The heightened financial market instability will stoke concerns among economic players and result in conservative spending and investment patterns, while slowing corporate activities.
With the Trade Ministry set to release new export figures on Tuesday, eyes are focused on whether the country will continue its downward streak for a 14th straight month, which will further dampen business outlook. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Now, Korea has opened a new medical information centre to cater purely for foreign visitors. The country has become a real medical tourist hotspot for people around the world in recent years. Kim Min-ji went to check it out and filed this report.
Saren Dolger is from Mongolia. She's in Seoul to receive treatment for a thyroid and digestive condition she's been battling because services here are more reliable than back home.
This Korean hospital is very famous among Mongolians. This is my second visit. The medical equipment and doctors here are top-notch and the service is excellent.
She is just one of many foreigners receiving medical treatment in Korea. Back in 2009, just over 60,000 medical tourists visited the country, but by 2014, the figure grew more than fourfold. As of the first half of last year, the cumulative figure topped 1 million. Business is booming, but not for all hospitals. In a recent survey of some 200 local institutions, interpretation services were needed the most in order to attract foreign patients, followed by counseling support for visa issues. And to offer a helping hand, the Health Ministry opened its first Medical Korea Information Center in central Seoul. The center is expected to make it much more convenient for foreign patients in Korea by offering interpretation services, medical consulting, as well as giving legal advice to sort out medical disputes. Effective promotion of Korea's medical tourism program is a huge factor for success, but organizers say there's more to it than that.
We've seen explosive growth during the past 8 years, but at the same time, problems have grown too, including the issue of illegal brokers. As the market gets bigger, it's not just about promotion of our services. Foreigners need to trust us in order to come to us.
Some of the center's first visitors were impressed.
It's very good that I can get Russian services here. I've had difficulties before because I don't speak Korean.
Along with the opening of the center, Korea plans to boost comprehensive support and offer more diverse medical tourism packages with the aim of attracting some 400,000 visitors this year alone. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, Korea is aiming to send an unmanned vehicle to the moon by the year 2020. It's a plan that could take off sooner than expected, thanks to a fresh deal to boost space cooperation with the United States. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
South Korea and the U.S. have agreed on a deal to boost civilian exchanges in the space sector. It is aimed at establishing a legal and institutional framework for increased cooperation in space science, Earth observation, and space exploration. This in addition to data transfer of space-related technology, intellectual property, sharing facility, and exchanges of personnel. State-run agencies that will be involved include the Korea Aerospace Research Institute, KAIST, the Korea Meteorological Administration, the U.S. Geological Survey, and NASA. Korea's Science Ministry expects the agreement will boost the country's moon and space exploration efforts and result in the creation of a homegrown rocket and more satellites. The ministry plans to start pumping in roughly $160 million into the project over the next 3 years. This is the first time the U.S. has agreed to a government-to-government deal on space cooperation with a nation. So far, the U.S. has sealed similar agreements with 10 countries, including Russia, Canada, and France. Related talks began in 2010, but only gained momentum after a summit between President Park Geun-hye and her U.S. counterpart Barack Obama last October. In 2013, Korea became the 11th country to join the Space Club after it successfully launched its NATO satellite into space. Kim Jeong, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to our newscast. And we'll be back today at 10 a.m. Korea time. We are going to be bringing you live coverage of President Park Geun-hye's Independence Movement Day speech. So until then, goodbye.